Now, are there more Guy Fawkes masks in the Purge movies than this one, or less?
Well, I'm going to talk about eco-terrorism.
Got too excited about jorts.
I am leaving now with my Roomba or your blood on my hands.
I'm back on my bullshit.
What is meme if not air horn persevering?
No, this is not a family show.
And I quote, many American titties.
Why'd you have to bring Dane Cook to this, Andrew? No one wanted that.
Oh, you guys are not ready for what I've got today.
And I've apparently hit the very end of my attention span.
Give me like 30 seconds, I'm looking for rhymes.
Hi, everyone. Kyle here. Before we get started today, I just wanted to give everyone a heads up that this episode is about the graphic novel V for Vendetta, which is a very violent story, and it starts right off the bat with threatened rape, as well as racial slurs, homophobic slurs, antisemitism, pedophilia, medical experimentation, torture, concentration camps, and other violent things that go along with telling a story about a fascist state. If none of those things are for you, we absolutely understand, and we will see you next week. We just wanted to give you that heads up before we got started today. Hello, and welcome to Debate This, the show where no one is right, but someone is definitely wrong. In this show, we take time out of our busy adult lives to talk about comic books, video games, and how when a work of fiction makes depictions of the future based on the conditions of their present time, and then some of those depictions come true, it's not prophetic, it's just unfortunate. And maybe good writing, but mostly just unfortunate.
But Kyle, The Simpsons can tell the future.
Once again, Matt, it's not prophetic, it's just unfortunate. Gang, it's time for another flavor text. This week's edition is brought to your earballs thanks to patron Discord username NathanLV, who wanted to hear
earballs now.
We're doing.
I didn't sign off on earballs.
We're
in season
doing.
5.
We're doing
Yeah,
earballs now. Sorry, everyone. Who wanted to hear me give the DT exclamation point FT treatment to another seminal graphic novel, V for Vendetta.
Okay, I'm not gonna
Anthony.
lie. This one time I read DT exclamation point FT as Duttfoot, which I thought was pretty funny. Wants to hear me give the Duttfoot treatment.
The Duttfoot treatment.
Oh, DT feet is our calendar that comes out at the end of the year. So that's a very different thing.
Todd is making that on his own time with his own feet.
You wish it were just my feet.
Sorry, Todd, the Photoshop trial ran out.
So V for Vendetta is a graphic novel in both senses of the word, in that there are graphic depictions in it, and it's a hefty chunk of text. So,
And in that, it's a novel concept about living in a fascist state. That will totally not happen. Whoops, sorry. Did I spill the beans?
you might have spilled the beans a little bit. So I will not be going on this venture alone. Joining me today in our revolutionary work are Todd Verwurig Thomas, Matt Virtue Victorious Cole, and Andrew Vaudeville Henderson. Anyone?
No notes.
No notes?
No,
Good.
I mean, I've seen the movie. I get it.
Yeah, right.
I know your next question. So I'm saving what I have to say until then.
We've
Okay.
all seen V movies before, Kyle.
Yeah, they're all chapter titles, and all the chapters of V for Vendetta start with the letter V because it's a theme. Alan Moore does themes. So guys, what do you all know about V for Vendetta?
I can say that I know more about V for Vendetta than I did about One Piece, but still not a lot. I think I saw the movie once, and that was like it. I checked the box to understand the societal references.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I don't think I'll be the last person to say this today, but I saw the movie in high school. I thought it was really cool when it came out. I've since seen it again and think it's fine. It has its moments. It's definitely very 2004. Also, my best friend in high school was obsessed with it.
Good.
Go ahead, Matt.
I, like most, have also, as a white man, seen V for Vendetta. I do think I've only seen it once though, and I didn't see it until like the pandemic. It was in my when we were in lockdown, and I was, I should consume every piece of media I've never seen before.
I should catch up on things.
Yeah, V for Vendetta was in that box, but I also had a friend in high school who very much enjoyed the movie, so I got most of the references, but I didn't know until we sat down to record this that there was a graphic novel. I thought it was just a movie, of which I will say that Natalie Portman put on a master class in acting, I think. I think that's a really good Natalie Portman movie.
Yeah, Natalie Portman's very good in the movie. So, as we've mentioned, V for Vendetta is a graphic novel that was started writing in 1981, was turned into a movie in 2005. We will talk about the movie at the end of all this. Written by Alan Moore, comic book wizard, druid, and recluse. Illustrated by David Lloyd. Moore you may recognize as the author of other well-known comics and graphic novels such as Watchmen and Batman the Killing Joke. Lloyd has illustrated other comics, including a run of Doctor Who comics from the 80s and some post-Neil Gaiman Sandman anthologies, but nothing in his resume stood out like V for Vendetta does. It's kind of his biggest work.
Okay.
Alan Moore, the photo of him on Wikipedia, looks like he is a famous old, he looks like the man who told us stars existed. Like he looks like the man who walked in,
does.
who foretold a tragedy was about to befall a village, and so they painted him on a wall. Like, that's what this man looks like.
Alan Moore, I encourage everyone to seek out some interview with Alan Moore, because he is both, holds the two truths at the same time, both insane, definitely not tethered to reality, and has a very firm grasp of the world and its conditions and the evils killing us all. Fascinating figure.
He looks like if Rasputin, instead of inventing aspirin and taking over the Russian monarchy, if Rasputin decided to get super into communism, and I guess Rasputin. Well,
no,
I guess that actually fits. Yeah,
yeah. He's he's very Rasputin-esque.
One of the two men predicted a fascist state. The answer might surprise you.
Have we ever seen them in the same place at once?
Yeah.
If I
you
say
call him a druid, so that's
that's true.
Mm-hmm.
If I say the name Vermin Supreme, does that mean anything to you guys?
Yep. Yeah. Vermin Supreme and Alan Moore both cut from the same cloth.
Andrew, you can Google that on your own time, bud.
I'm gonna do it right now.
Andrew not knowing who Vermin Supreme is a little surprising.
It's a little surprising.
Yeah.
Well, this will be a good time. Go to our Patreon, join the highest tier, and wait 3 months, and then someone commission us to do a flavor text on Vermin Supreme.
This man is very much my jam.
Yeah, man, I would love to do a Vermin Supreme flavor text. Patreon.com/debatethiscast, please.
Back to the topic at hand. V for Vendetta's first issue was published in 1981 in Warrior, a British comic anthology series. Similar to whatever publication Demon Hunter was first published in that Andrew told us about. Similar type of
Demon Slayer.
What'd I say? Demon Hunter. That's fine. Yeah. Similar type of publication where a bunch of different comic books, issues, will be put into one zine and go out. And it eventually did well enough to get its own spin-off comic. So here we are with V for Vendetta. It is Alan Moore's first or second attempt at heading a series himself. He also did Miracle Man around the same time. And it is his first attempt at doing so with a character he created whole cloth. So it gets rocky at times. It is not perfect text by any stretch of the word, but it is very formative, very seminal graphic novel, and hits on a lot of topics that still resonate today.
Neat. Man, when are the states gonna get like a comic anthology? Do we have comic anthologies? Is that a thing? Like where you could just open up a book and just like read new different comics that aren't like Marvel?
If we do, we're definitely well past that since print is dying. But
Yeah.
Sure, fair enough.
I don't know if we had something like that.
Yeah.
I think the best version of that might be just when new IPs come out on like Free Comic Book Day.
That might have been what like Action Comics and Detective Comics that Superman and Batman appeared in were. They weren't just Superman for 30 pages, right. But I don't know how long that lasted.
Marvel did the like Tales of Suspense and Tales of Mystery, I think was another one. And I know Dark Horse still does big compendium compilation things like that, but
okay.
I don't know. That sounds like a Library of Congress type thing.
All right. Well, in addition to Vermin Supreme, I guess we're doing an episode on the Library of Congress.
Indeed.
All right, go ahead, Kyle.
Okay. So this was all to say, this was written during the early Thatcher administration in Britain. Alan Moore is a British author. And during the height of the AIDS crisis. So Moore wrote his observations and frustrations with that administration into his dystopian novel, highlighting what he recognized as fascist behavior becoming more normalized and giving him an outlet to express his anarchist beliefs. The book is way more like pro-anarchy than the movie. And like actual anarchy, not like stop the bad stop the bad guys, not like punk rock anarchy. Yeah, it's like very like no order, just everyone fending for themselves is the main character's desired outcome here. So let's get into it.
This side by side of Alan Moore
very
and
good.
Gregory Rasputin and Vermin Supreme is just
it's very
chef's
good.
kiss.
It really is.
Echoes throughout history. All right. So the graphic novel is broken up into 3 books. So we'll start through book 1. It is called Europe After the Rain. And it's kind of gives us all our backstory and introduction to our characters. So we open, it is November 5th, 1997, 9 p.m. This book will then play out over the next couple weeks. I did not track all the dates as they appear in the book, but here we go. We meet our POV character, Evie Hammond, a 16-year-old girl, as she gets ready to go out for her first night as a sex worker in order to make ends meet for her full-time job. Unfortunately, the first person she solicits is an undercover police officer, or a fingerman, as they are called in this society.
Aw, beans.
Thank you. I don't need that.
Nope.
That's not great.
And he calls his squad to rape and kill her as punishment for breaking the law. He literally says, like, I'm a police officer. I get to exercise justice however I see fit. So we're going to do whatever we want to you and then kill you.
Gross.
I hope if listeners, you're playing at home, we're playing a game of how quickly can you become triggered by this episode.
Terrible.
Trigger warnings, the episode. She is rescued by a man in a black coat and a Guy Fawkes mask as he attacks the fingermen and kills 3 of them. 2 with knives and 1 with an exploding false hand that they take from him.
Oh,
cool.
He swoops Evie to a nearby rooftop where they watch as the Houses of Parliament explode and fireworks form a V in the sky above the wreckage. The V symbol will keep appearing. It is kind of a inverted anarchist symbol. Let me pull up let me drop that in the show notes here. So there's the V in the show notes. He also quotes, he makes mention of how it is Guy Fawkes Day, and recites the poem for Guy Fawkes Day that anyone who was an edgy teen in the 2000s now knows. Remember, remember the 5th of November, the gunpowder treason and plot. I know of no reason why the gunpowder treason should ever be forgot. Guy Fawkes was a actual person from the 13th century who tried to overthrow Parliament with bombs and was arrested and failed. So for a few centuries, Britain burned bonfires on the day of his arrest to celebrate not being overthrown.
Question, Kyle. I don't know if you know this or not. I have heard before, and I don't know if I'm misremembering it or not, but I've heard that that's like a thing. Like British children in grade school just like learn this. Like this is a staple in British history. Is that true?
I don't know how true it is today. Okay. It's kind of like this poem is kind of like Ring Around the Rosie, where like they'll say it and not know what it means, and then when you look into what it means, it's like, oh, it's about a coup attempt. Where Ring Around the Rosie is like, oh, it's about people dying of the bubonic plague. Like, similar cut. So we cut from this scene of them watching British Parliament blow up to the inner workings of Norse Fire, the name of the fascist party in control of London at the time of the novel.
Not gonna lie, pretty rad name.
Yeah, Norse Fire. Yeah. Fascists historically pretty good on branding. So, I mean,
if you're gonna force us to do the compliment sandwich,
I mean, look, I've worked in marketing. There's that Venn diagram is pretty big,
pretty wide crossover in that Venn diagram.
Yeah.
I'm going to throw a lot of names at you. Some of these people will keep reappearing. Some of them will die fairly quickly. I'll help keep them straight as the names appear. So we meet the leader, Adam Susan, the eye, Conrad Heyer, who manages all the surveillance systems of the fascist state, the ear, Brian Etheridge, who does like wiretapping and audio surveillance. The nose, Eric Finch, is kind of head detective, sniffing out clues. The nose, get it?
Okay.
Finch is an important name that keeps coming back. We are also introduced to the head of the Fingermen, Derek Almond, another name who comes back. The leader, Finch, and Almond are probably the three most important out of that.
There's not a tongue.
There's a voice.
There's a voice. Yeah.
There's a voice and a mouth, which we will meet in a little bit.
There's because she works for the news station in the movie. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. Got it.
So the leader instructs Almond to meet with Jordan Dascombe, head of the propaganda wing of Norse Fire, which is the mouth, is the propaganda wing. And we also meet Louis Prothero, the voice of fate, who reads the hourly propaganda briefings on the radio. It's revealed here that Prothero collects dolls and is likely a closeted gay man. It's also hinted that Dascombe is as well, but in that like 80s way where like they're not gonna outwardly say it.
Sure.
Sure.
And Almond reacts negatively to the information that Prothero is probably gay. Just to kind of show where everyone's values in this fascist state lie.
Got it.
We cut to V showing Evie his lair, the Shadow Gallery, where he has collected paintings, music.
It's less great.
Yeah. 80s edge.
Yeah.
80s edge. Where he has collected paintings, music, television broadcasts, and any works of art that he was able to after they were banned by Norse Fire. They have this scene where she comments on how beautiful the music is that's playing, and he's like, "Oh, this is Dancing in the Street by I had the name and I lost it, man."
David Lee Roth.
Nope, not that one. Not that Dancing in the Street. The original, the Motown version.
Is it the one by the Jaggers?
Nope.
Oh, that's not the Supremes, is it?
No, it's someone in the Vandellas.
It's been covered 1,000 times.
Martha and the Vandellas.
Martha and the Vandellas.
V for Vandella. Got it.
Yep.
There it is.
It's all full circle.
I'm glad that's what's gonna stay in the edit.
Got it.
And Evie comments that she's never heard such beautiful music before, and to which V responds something along the lines of, "They eradicated some cultures more efficiently than others," implying a white supremacist bent to Norse fire, and implying that, and because he comments how it's Motown and how it's a black artist movement,
much like
and
marketing departments. Those Venn diagrams are pretty,
just real overlap in here. V then leaves Evie in the Shadow Gallery to go kidnap Louis Prothero, killing two men he was traveling with, and leaving a Violet Carson rose at the crime scene, which have been thought to be extinct since the war, quote unquote.
Is that capital W, the war?
Capital T, capital W, the war.
Man, those air quotes are doing a lot of heavy lifting.
We'll come back to the war here. But he leaves that rose and he paints his V symbol in the train where he kills these guys and kidnaps Prothero. Both the rose and the V painting being his calling cards. He'll proceed to leave those clues at every crime scene he leaves. We see Prothero wake up in a recreation of a concentration camp where he worked as commander, as Evie, back in the Shadow Gallery, exposits how the war happened from her point of view. In what is now classic Maury fashion, it is an alternate history where JFK is still president in 1988 when this happens.
Of course it's
seriously?
the JFK assassination.
Okay. Why every time? Why can there only be one unifying Nexus event?
So good.
So in 1988, when Evie was 7, the U.S. and the Soviet Union enter a nuclear war after the Soviets invade Poland. The nuclear crisis leaves the world in a nuclear winter, leading to famine, drought, flood, and disease in the UK specifically. Moore said in the version of the graphic novel I have, Moore wrote a little foreword where he says at the time, I operated under the assumption that we would survive a nuclear war of that degree. I now have since learned we would not, and would change my writing accordingly. So, it's what they thought in 81 when he wrote it. So in 1991, Evie's mom died of a plague that had spread as a result of the drought, famine, and flood. And as conditions worsened, the UK became a failed state, overrun with gangs trying to hoard and steal the remaining resources. In 1992, a militant group called Norse Fire formed and violently eradicated these gangs and formed a government supported by the people of the UK for restoring order to this wasteland. Once in power, they took, quote, all the black people and the Pakistanis, white people too, all the radicals and men who liked other men, end quote, to concentration camps. In 1993, Evie's dad was taken to a camp for belonging to a socialist party before the war, and she was put into forced labor, where she worked for 4 years before the events at the start of the book. Kind of catching us up on the war and Evie's experience with it.
So, as far as I recollect, it's pretty close to the movie so far, yeah?
Pretty close to the movie so far. The movie is set in... So this is set in 1997. The movie is set in 2020. And the inciting incident is not a war, but a viral pandemic that spreads over the globe. So
I remember that.
Awesome.
A tad different. But more or less
they did a what if the 80s were what if this were today kind of thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Versus
More or
doing
less similar though. We'll cover the differences at the end between the two. So we cut back to Prothero, who is wandering around this recreation of the Lark Hill resettlement camp, which is a recurring setting in the story. Again, he was a commander here. And V tells him that he was at the camp with him as a prisoner. and remembers how he lined prisoners up every day to choose one to execute or torture, and remembers that he also worked the ovens at this camp. There's a scene of V with he had previously lined up all of Prothero's dolls in like prison camp clothes in the fake prison yard of this concentration camp. It's all very dramatic. He gives a whole speech to Evie before he sets out how melodrama is very important to achieving his goals, apparently.
These things have to mean something.
Yes, they have to mean something. And then V leads Prothero down a hall of rooms, each labeled with 5 doors, each labeled with a Roman numeral 1 through 5, stopping at number 5, the letter V.
I remember this so vividly, this reveal in the movie.
Oh yeah,
like it was just the like.
It happens in the second act, later in the movie, right?
It's way later.
It's
yeah,
very like one of the first things we learn here. So stopping at door number 5, V reveals to Prothero that this was his room where he was experimented on, and he remembers hearing Prothero's voice out through the door. V then turns a light to the ovens of the concentration camp, which are packed full of more of Prothero's dolls, and he turns the oven on, burning all the dolls in a very dramatic image, and we cut away to finding Prothero's body outside the police station, his face painted like a doll, eyes staring off into the middle distance, and he is unable to speak except saying the word mama over and over like a doll.
Jesus.
Descombe and comments oh, he's not going to be able to be the voice of fate anymore. The people are going to notice this change, and it will weaken our position having faltered. So this is kind of revealing V's whole plan. He's going to piece by piece take down these institutions of power. In Norse Fire. We get a chapter of just the leader and V kind of waxing philosophic to no one in particular. So the leader praises fascism and even says I support fascism. What of it is his exact wording.
big whoop. Want to fight about it?
Yeah. Valuing order over freedom. Saying freedom and choice are luxuries that the world can't afford right now.
Yada, blah, 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 megalomaniacal.
Yeah. V talks to a statue of Madam Justice, the blindfolded golden statue holding the scales on top of the Capitol building, and blames her for falling in with fascism, saying that true justice is freedom and anarchy before he blows up the statue and the roof to the Capitol building. We cut back to the Shadow Gallery, where V asks Evie to help in his next plan, and she agrees, and we cut to Westminster Abbey, where the bishop has a name, I forget it, he's just the bishop, is giving a sermon and speaking for the state reinforces Norse Fire's one race, one creed, one hope ideology.
Ding.
There it is.
The bishop adjourns to his chambers after the sermon and is revealed to be a serial pedophile.
And ding.
Taking a teenage girl into his chambers. They comment how this one today is older than he normally likes. Who readers will recognize as Evie. She distracts the bishop, opens a window, and allows V to sneak into the chambers.
Kyle, can we just real quick? I have a question.
Yeah.
So, how did Evie get? How did Evie get into cahoots with V?
He literally saved her from those cops, and that was it.
Okay,
No earlier planning went into that other than he saved her and she had nowhere else to go now.
Got it.
Okay. So she opens a window. We see V slip into these chambers, and we cut to Almond and Finch investigating the bishop's chambers as a crime scene, where they find another V spray painted on the wall and a Violet Carson rose. They scan recordings from this crime scene and learn that V forced the bishop to take a poisoned communion wafer. After forcing the bishop to reveal how he knows V, how he worked as chaplain at the Lark Hill concentration camp, and getting him to talk about V's escape from the camp, where revealing that V started like a chemical fire and released mustard gas throughout the camp, allowing him as his cover to escape. V is much less heroic in the book than he is in the movie. The movie, movie makes it very clear, like good versus evil, where the book does a pretty good job of having you question the whole time, like, do these ends really justify the means?
Sure.
Yeah, he's very much just on a revenge rampage.
It is vendetta is the key word here, you know, like that kind of gets left out of the movie. Like it's more a cool word they use in the movie. A forensic investigator shows up, Dr. Surridge. She becomes a character we need to know. And she tells Finch that even though the bishop was poisoned, the official cause of death was a knife wound. I don't know. I don't know the significance of that, but it's there. Evie, we cut back to the shadow gallery where Evie tells V she will not be taking part in any future killings of his. To which V replies with more pontificating on the virtues of anarchy.
Guy's a little insufferable, huh?
Yeah, man.
It's a little insufferable.
Yeah.
We cut to Almond in his home, taking his frustration with V's killings and escaping out on his wife, hitting her and he fires an unloaded gun at her too. He's not a good dude. Finch then connects the dots between Lark Hill, Prothero, the bishop, and V, and realize that V has been killing off everyone who worked at the Lark Hill concentration camp over the past 4 years. Okay. More or less undetected until now.
I feel like that should have been a through line that someone should have picked up on.
Should have. As he comes to this realization, he realizes Dr. Surridge is going to be V's next victim and rushes out of his home to go save her, pull her into protective custody or something. At this same time, we see V sneak into the doctor's home. She immediately recognizes V and breaks down into tears and apologizes for everything she helped facilitate at Lark Hill. She led the experiments on those 5 rooms. She asks him to see his face one more time and takes his mask off of him and calls him beautiful before he injects her with poison. And then Almond shows up and he kills Almond as he escapes as well. So he kills off Almond and the doctor here. It's important to note we have not seen V's face at this point, nor have we as she sees it. I don't think we see it throughout the whole comic.
Sure.
Do we know why? Is that revealed later?
It's implied that the experiments disfigured him in some way, or the fires he set disfigured him in some way, but it is never spelled out.
He's got Phantom of the Opera.
He's got Phantom of the Opera face. Yeah. Yeah. So Finch reporting to the leader let me back up here. We cut to Finch investigating the crime scene at the doctor's house. He is with the leader now, as these killings have been deemed political and more important. and he is reading from Dr. Surridge's diary starting in 1993, covering her time at Larkhill. She writes that she conducted hormone treatments on quote-unquote subhumans imprisoned at the concentration camp, and describes the results, which are typically physical deformities. One prisoner in room 5 seemed unaffected by the treatments until he had a psychotic break, after which he showed an increased intelligence. For some reason, the guards believed him to be harmless. He was, very eloquent and like talking with them, so they let him out into the garden, where he doubled like the crop output of this prison garden.
Okay.
And he grew he started growing these Violet Carson roses that he is now using as his calling card. So that's how she like knew he was coming for her, because she saw the reports on the roses. He also secretly grew what he needed to make a napalm type material and mustard gas in the garden, which he then used to escape. Finch remarks that V probably left the diary himself, wanting to like explain his motives, and they note that any identifying information about him has been ripped out.
It's all gone.
It's all gone.
Convenient.
And they say it in the super fashy way of like, so we don't know if he's gay or Jew or black or whatever. And like,
Yeah.
yeah. And that's the end of book 1.
Hey,
Cool.
I have a question.
All right.
Yeah.
I've not watched this movie in
A decade.
16 years. Can anyone, all of you, some of you, tell me like how much of this is in the movie, like where we are at, if this is all still in the movie? I'm just curious if the movie covers like the whole arc of the books, or if it's like the movie is just this one book and they summed it up nicely.
Everything I spell out more or less is in the movie. They changed some. There are names that swapped. Not all these names are the same, and some characters and story arcs get removed for time's sake. I more or less don't cover the stories that don't appear in the movie because they show up late, and I didn't put the groundwork in the early chapters where they needed to be, and they don't super matter to like the overall theme of the plot.
Okay.
But it is all there. Give or take.
I'm going to pretend that I actually only asked that question for our listeners, who may be wondering how much of this content makes it from book to movie.
If you don't want to read, you can get the vibe from the movie.
Right.
But we will cover at the end, again, where the movie fails to capture the essence of the book.
If I'm remembering correctly, I think right now the biggest departure is probably with the Evie character, because I remember Natalie Portman's character being sufficiently older than 16. I mean, she was living by herself, with working a full-time job.
Yes,
I also remember Prothero being a much different character. He wasn't like a villain.
That is possible. Evie is definitely given more agency and more control in the movie. She is kind of carried from plot point to plot point in the book,
Right.
and she is like goes through the same beats, but it's more her call than it is in the book, which we're gonna cover some right now. So we go to book 2, A Vicious Cabaret. This opens on January 5th, 1988, so a few months after the events of the first book. We see Evie and V in the Shadow Gallery, and she asks V why he's never pursued her romantically, questioning his sexuality or even suggesting that he's her father, since the
50-50.
Since the timelines
A lot of swings
sort of
right
line
there.
up. A lot of swings.
Yeah, it's gonna be one or the other.
Yeah.
V responds by blindfolding her, leading her out into the streets, telling her that he's not her father, that her father is in fact dead, and then abandons her.
Well, that's just the way my father would react.
Yeah, he like says like, I'm not your father, he is in fact dead, and then Evie just hears like silence, and like waits for a while and finally removes her blindfold and is like, wait, he's gone. Where am I? So super dick move on V's part. We see Rosemary Almond at her husband's funeral, and she has the realization that she is now alone, has no support. She is now a new kind of main character, another through line that keeps appearing through the rest of the books. At the same time, we see V sneak into a Norse Fire propaganda studio and take over its broadcast. On the broadcast, V tells the viewers that they are guilty of allowing dictators to come to power and turning a blind eye to their abuses and prejudices, and uses footage of Hitler and Mussolini from World War II next to images of modern-day Norse Fire to really drive home his point.
I'm glad we checked the victim-blaming box.
Yes, sure are. Fingerman storm the studio and shoot V, only to reveal that he had actually kidnapped and bound and gagged Jordan Dascombe and put him in V's costume to sit in the chair while a recording played. So they killed their head of propaganda, thinking it was V.
Nice.
Yeah. We jump ahead a little, and we see Evie struggling with V's abandonment. She has turned to alcoholism as a coping mechanism. She now lives with a man named Gordon, who controls a small street gang and works in kind of black market smuggling.
That's who I was thinking was Prothero. Yep,
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I remember the guy. He was like the Jon Stewart guy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Gordon is very different than the movie portrayal.
The movie Gordon.
The movie Gordon works for the studio and kind of does a whole like satire of the leader and then gets killed in the none of that is in this. He is generally pretty kind to her, even though he's a criminal, and they eventually enter a relationship before he is killed by a rival crime boss. The crime boss has a name, is also a recurring character, but ultimately like can be left out of the plot synopsis and you don't miss a ton. So
James Crimeman.
Evie goes to a nightclub that is controlled by this rival crime boss, hoping to exact some kind of revenge. And we see Rosemary Almond is there now working as a dancer at this nightclub to show how far her life has fallen. While waiting outside for one of her potential victims to separate from the group, she is knocked unconscious by the police, by a man in a police officer's uniform. We cut to Evie in a very dream state from being knocked unconscious. She sees images of her home, her father, Gordon, the bishop, and eventually V, before she wakes up in a prison cell. Guards play her the video of her like soliciting the fingermen at the beginning of the book, telling her she's going to jail unless she tells them who she's working with, and they torture her, shave her head, and generally do all the prison-y, concentration-y camp things one would do as a prisoner of the fascist state. She spends a lot of time alone in her cell, as a prisoner would, and she eventually like sees this rat coming and going enough from her cell room that she goes to investigate where it's coming from, and finds a hole in her cell with a testimony written by a former prisoner of Norse Fire named Verily. We get a whole chapter of the book is Evie reading Valerie's like written out testimony that she smuggled away. Valerie came out as a lesbian when she was a teenager and was immediately shunned by her family. She attended acting school and became an actress and starred in a movie where she met her partner, Ruth. She remembers Ruth used to bring her roses and that they were very happy until Norse Fire captured her for being a gay woman. Ruth gave up Valerie's name while being tortured, leading to Valerie's eventual capture, and writes that people can preserve their freedom even when imprisoned by maintaining their integrity. Theme of the book. written out.
All right.
Theme of the
Yep.
book right there.
There it is.
Yeah. Later, when Evie is being interrogated / tortured, she remembers Valerie's letter and refuses to admit to confess to any of the crimes they are trying to like pin on her or get her to admit, specifically that she was brainwashed by V to participate in these killings, asserting that she assisted him willingly, just standing by her man, I guess. They tell her you can.
Are you thinking of that scene in Goldeneye?
Maybe.
Yeah. Don't call me out like that.
They tell her she can either sign this quote unquote confession they have written out for her, or she can die. And she says, "Well, then just kill me." And she is then told they have nothing left to threaten her with, and that she is free. Similar to when she was abandoned in the street, she takes a while to like look up and look around her, and she finds that the guards that were in the room with her were in fact just dummies, and the prison facility she was in was just a recreation within the Shadow Gallery, not unlike the concentration camp V had made for Prothero.
Kind of fucked up.
Pretty fucked up.
Yeah.
Pretty fucked up.
Yeah, V had orchestrated this whole kidnapping, torture thing, but does tell her that Valerie was a real person, and does tell her, and tells her that the reason he did this was it was the only way he could teach her what it means to be free and to truly free her from the chains of society or whatever. It's not great. It's
Sucks.
Super sucks.
Super sucks.
Sucks.
Yeah. But she is now free from the mindset of that fascism and government in general impose on her.
It sucks for a lot of reasons, but more predominantly, it sucks because it implies that the only difference between fascism and freedom is intent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure from what I've read collecting stuff for this, Alan Moore is the first to admit that he was a very green writer at the time. And
Right.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
you
it's a
shanked that
cool
one.
twist. It's a cool twist. It just like it is very weird. But again, like it actually I've always struggled with it with the movie. Like I think that's like a real low point in the movie. Like it's really well acted by Natalie Portman, obvi.
yeah.
But like it's really out of that character's personality for the movie as a hero. But like you've kind of painted this character as a really shitty person, so it's not incredibly off-brand.
It makes
Yeah.
more sense in the book than it does in
Yeah.
the movie, because the movie goes so far out of its way to paint V as a heroic person,
Yeah.
where the book very much is like, well, he's also like killing a lot of people for the fun of killing people, just like the
Right.
fascist government
Yeah,
is.
like
yeah.
if your aim is to paint him as the absolute foil of the leader, then this is a very good job of doing
Yes. And that is, again, where the book handles it with with more nuance
Yeah.
than the movie does.
that. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. I'm back in.
Okay,
Let's go.
Yeah,
we're
I'm
back
with
on. Well, good news, because we're cutting to a break. So, got you all back on board. We are going to take a quick break, and we will be right back with the third book of the graphic novel and to talk about the movie. From the nerds at Debate This comes a new streaming experience.
Last year, we launched The Plus is Loose, a podcast where we dove into plot details, Easter eggs, and wild speculation into 2021's breadth of new MCU content.
And we're still going to do that. We're just changing some things.
Coming to Twitch this March, a show that asks the real questions.
Kyle, why are you talking like that? Yes, anyway, starting with the release of Moon Knight on March 30th, we will be streaming our MCU post show at twitch.tv/debatethiscast. Episodes will still be posted on the same podcast feed a day later.
So just like when Mephisto...
What? No, we're not going to talk about Mephisto anymore.
Yeah, unless he actually shows up.
Bringing you the best recaps of the MCU, and only the MCU.
Well, that's not entirely true.
Yeah, we talked about this, bud. We're gonna cover other stuff too.
Yeah, all kinds of comic book TV shows and movies, just like that Jared Leto movie Morbius that's definitely coming out.
Yeah, and we're also going to have special guests to tell us what they thought of the thing we watched.
Guys, I'm sorry. I screwed this whole thing up. I'll just go.
No, Kyle, no, it's okay. We still need someone to reveal the new name.
Yeah, why don't you do it?
Yeah? You mean it?
Yeah, go on ahead.
Coming this March to Twitch. Look out for Avenge This, a comic book movie and television discussion show where we watch all of the MCU stuff and also some of the DC stuff that we want to watch. You can watch Avenge This live at twitch.tv/debatethiscast or download episodes through the Avenge This podcast feed wherever you download podcasts.
Hey,
Nice,
there
way
you
to go,
go.
guys. Super duper.
And we're back. We're going to talk about the rest of the graphic novel and the movie. So we're going to kick that off with book 3, which is titled The Land of Do As You Please, which is a phrase taken out of one of V's earlier pontificatings on the merits of anarchism. It's like one of the metaphors he uses is this mythical land where you can do whatever you want. It's 80s edge all the way down, baby.
It is 80s edge. You're 100% right.
So this one opens on November 5th, 1998, 1 year after the book's opening events. V tells Evie that his plan is coming to an end and then blows up the state's surveillance systems. He hijacks the state broadcast and, under the guise of the voice of fate, tells the populace that they won't be watched or listened to for 3 days and are free to do what they want. Smash cut to chaos in London streets as people loot, riot, and generally revolt against their fascist oppressors. We get a good scene of the leader starting to break down and trying to confide in his supercomputer, his AI supercomputer wife, which I guess becomes a trope after this.
I'm sorry, wait.
Has that been there the whole time?
He has had an AI that he's like, it's like a Google Alexa. It's like an Alexa, essentially.
Yeah.
And at this point, he is so distraught over losing control that he is talking to his Alexa as though it is a loving partner who supports him and not a advanced search function. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I mean, we've talked about super-powered AI wives before, i.e. the Umbrella Academy, so...
Yeah, it's true.
So the leader is losing his grip on sanity and orders that all these looters and rioters are shot on sight. V explains to Evie.
Feels bad.
Yeah, V goes into another pontificating moment and explains to Evie that this chaos will eventually subside on its own and will give way to voluntary order, and that true anarchy is a coalition of equals without leaders. So we get
it's just the purge. I mean, we have the purge going on,
Yeah.
and then it'll all be fine. People just got to get it out of their system,
they just got to get it out of their system. We see
or whatever it is the purge has been trying to tell us for 6 movies.
I don't... It's hard to say.
I think they lost the thread there somewhere halfway through the first one.
Yeah, somewhere it just became Crime the movie.
Yeah.
Now, are there more Guy Fawkes masks in the Purge movies than this one, or less?
They're
The answer
or
may
they-
surprise you.
yeah, right.
Todd, run the
I've
numbers
seen-
on that for us and get back to us.
I've seen 0 Purge movies, but there's got to be a Guy Fawkes.
There's definitely one Guy Fawkes mask
Purge.
per Purge movie.
and
I'm
they thought it
calling
was a cute Easter egg they put in
Yep.
there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I refuse to believe it's 0.
It's definitely more than 0.
All right, nerds, get in the comments. Let us know.
So we see Finch, the nose of the fate, goes to Larkhill, and he takes LSD to try and get into the mind of V. while tripping, he has visions of people burning in the ovens and hanging off a barbed wire, and sees the diversity of the victims was actually beautiful and necessary. So he has a full kind of conversion thanks to his acid trip at this concentration
this
camp.
Isn't the 80s,
Yeah.
disaster thing, doing drugs to understand racism.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And after this realization, and while still tripping balls, he apologizes to all the victims of this concentration camp and hopes they know he loves them. Quote,
What an interesting turn.
unquote. Yeah. He finds himself imprisoned in V's cell, and as he comes down from the trip, he now realizes he is free from Norse Fire's lies, and that he still wants to bring V to justice for all the murders. So he's a good cop now.
Ah, yes.
And all it took was one hallucinogenic.
All it took was one good trip.
I was
Man,
waiting
if
for this
only.
to take a spin into wild fantasy, Kyle.
A lot of stuff happens with side characters that isn't really super worth talking about. But Finch encounters V in a subway tunnel and shoots him. He corners him in a subway tunnel, tells him he's going to pay for his crimes, and shoots him. But V manages to escape and tells him the big quote of the movie: You cannot kill the idea that I represent. You can kill the man, but you can't kill the idea. The thesis of the movie more than the book, but there it is. We also see Rosemary Almond shoot the leader at. I have a protest rally here. It's definitely more like riot / protest, and she shoots the leader while armed forces are trying to put down the rioters. V, bleeding, dying, goes to Evie and tells her that the people's new task is to, quote, rule themselves, and tells her that her mission is to now, quote, discover the true face behind the mask. It's a metaphor, she realizes, that V is meant to represent the desire for freedom in everyone. They kiss, and she dons his costume and Guy Fawkes mask and goes out to the rioters, addressing them, telling them that they can now choose freedom over the chains of government. In the prologue, we see Evie send V's body off in a subway car loaded with explosives and blows up Downing Street, representing the final destruction of the remaining government. She takes to the streets and saves a protege, much like V saved her at the beginning of the book, and sets off down a dark alley, presumably continuing V's work of showing the populace how to free themselves. Thus, the cycle continues.
Look,
endings are hard. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's V for Vendetta, the graphic novel as written by Alan Moore. What do you guys think?
I liked that. I think okay, so I didn't know going into this that there was a graphic novel. Like I 100%
You thought we were talking
that
about
it
the
was-
movie today.
Yes, I super did.
Yes.
And this sounds like a story that probably comes across a little bit better as a graphic novel because you don't have to convince people to sit through a 2-hour movie in a theater with a graphic novel, right? So like you don't have to make V come off as this morally gray character. You can just have him be pure anarchy. And I think that it's a cool examination of that. I would definitely be interested in reading a graphic novel. Do you know offhand who illustrated it, Kyle?
It is illustrated by, let me scroll back up to the top here, David Lloyd, who
Cool.
I noted hasn't done much more than this.
Right on. Yeah,
He's,
I mean,
he's been an artist on some minor comic runs, but this is pretty much his biggest claim to fame.
yeah, I think that and not to say that I didn't enjoy the movie, I know we're going to talk about the movie, and I did enjoy it, but I think that I probably would have enjoyed a graphic novel of this story more than I enjoyed the movie.
The graphic novel is actually very good. It takes this story that sounds very silly and edgelordy, and does elevate it to something a little more than that. It is still very silly and edgelordy at times, but intentionally so, and in a way that is much more palatable, I think.
If The Handmaid's Tale is Sonic the Hedgehog, V for Vendetta is Shadow the Hedgehog.
Okay.
Let me
Yes.
explain.
Yes.
So
Please.
I think so I couldn't help but like the whole time I'm thinking, why do I feel like I've heard this story like 1,000 times before? And I think it's because it does run very closely to The Handmaid's Tale in a lot of ways. Because Handmaid's Tale, have you guys seen Handmaid's Tale?
I have
Yeah.
not.
Oh, yeah.
No.
Kyle has. Kyle and Tata. Yeah, they both deal with the fascist state. Like, this is the British version of like our Handmaid's Tale is a very American version of that story, which is like, yes, it would be much more religious based. It would be much more like oppressive in a different way. Right?
Yeah.
But I think
both written during the 80s. The original
both-
Margaret
exactly,
Atwood
both-
novel was
both
written during the 80s.
But the big difference there is one was written by man, one was written by woman, and
Yep.
I think
Yeah.
the way that Margaret Atwood wrote it was like, people are going to devolve to their basest instinct, but those base instincts are a lot different.
Yes.
Me, Margaret Atwood I believe that those base instincts are a lot different than what Alan Moore believes, because Alan Moore's thing is like hyperviolence and whatever, and like everyone's just going to murder each other. But like, I like the take that it actually is a lot more sinister than that, which like feels bad. And I'm struggling because I think if you would have asked me 5 years ago, I'd been like, this is really cool. And like 5 years ago, I read his other big Watchmen, which I really enjoyed when I read it. I think like with the state of where the state of the world is in right now, and the fact that like we are so close to basically having a fascist party, and not to get super but, like, it just like my brain, like I think I'm trying to protect myself from this present day trauma.
Yeah.
And, like I'm trying to make myself not like this, because I can't do it right now. I guess is where I'm at.
When I read this during the lockdown portion of the pandemic, I had to like stop myself at one point from saying, because I was saying it too often, well, that echoes a little too loudly to something.
Yeah.
That, that feels a little too, that echoes a little too loudly. That feels a little too similar. Like, cause it is, again, he based this off of Margaret Thatcher's administration of when she ruled. And, a lot of the stuff we can comment on now, if we choose to, echoes the Reagan and Thatcher administration a lot, without getting too into it. So that is why it feels so prescient, and why you're the most annoying high school kid took so quickly to it, because it isn't subtle.
Yeah, that's a really well put. The subtlety is not there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's intentional. Like it was the 80s. Subtlety wasn't a word artists used a lot at the time. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Just to touch back on that too, like one of my, I would say, favorite genres of media is 80s apocalypse. Because the idea of the apocalypse
Here
in
it is,
the
man.
80s, yeah, right? It's there's just something that's like, almost kind of quaint about the apocalyptic ideas of the 80s, because it was such a different time 40 years ago, and where people thought the world was going to go, followed a lot of science fiction influence, but there wasn't a ton of apocalyptic media before the 80s. That was really a genre born out of the late 70s and early 80s.
I mean, the Cold War and the first atomic bomb dropping really birthed a lot of apocalyptic fiction.
Yeah.
All right, so second question, follow-up question, Matt. where does this sit in the pantheon of Brave New World and 1984 and Fahrenheit 451 and other 80s apocalypse mediums?
Yeah, man, that's a good question. I would definitely like to read it before I put it on that list. 1984 is, Brave New World is my favorite of those ones.
Yeah, Brave New World's very good.
Because I think
Brave New World and 1984 get compared a lot, and those very much are a British story versus an American story. Again,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fahrenheit 451 being the American story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did I get that right?
Yeah, because that's Ray Bradbury. And
yeah.
American author. Yeah.
Yeah, so it is interesting, but I agree with what you said, Andrew. Like, there was a point for me late 2020, early 2021, where, like, I've said on this show enough times, my favorite stuff are apocalypse and zombies. And there hit a point in our global pandemic where I was like, I just can't anymore.
No.
Like, I cannot.
Yeah.
I have loved zombie apocalypse for so long, and I cannot think about it right now. So even as a lover of the genre, I think the last, 6 or so years of trauma that we have experienced as the royal we have put a much different spin on these things, especially stuff coming from the 80s that was written when the apocalypse was certainly an idea born out of the Cold War, but didn't have as many tangible hands as it does now, what with the climate changes and the political divisions and such.
Well, and by the 80s and 90s, similar to how we see criticism of capitalism commercialized now, apocalypse media was very commercialized by this time as well too.
Absolutely, yeah.
Which takes some of the bite out of it. I will say, before we go on to the movie, the graphic novel definitely wears its 1984 inspiration on its sleeve. When I was rereading it now, because I had read 1984 in between my first reading and this reading, it just smacked me in the face of like, oh, more 1984 inspiration. Great.
Isn't 1984 anti-socialist though? That's
1984 is.
Or am I thinking of Animal Farm?
They're both anti-authoritarian.
Yeah, Animal Farm's a little more anti-capitalist.
Yeah, absolutely.
George Orwell was a socialist. He believed in socialism. 1984 is anti-authoritarian, anti-totalitarian. So it is still criticism of like the Soviet Union.
Okay.
Thank
you for
it is
me on that.
more than that. Yeah. I will also say, and I don't have any specific examples, but the other thing I noticed while reading this is a lot of 90s edgy artists definitely took their inspiration from V for Vendetta, and but it wasn't a well-known property at the time. It was like it had this cult following and was known among like comic book fans, but it wasn't a blockbuster movie yet. But that is where I realized like some threads poking out from media I remember growing up with. It was like, oh, that's an interesting tie back to V for Vendetta now. So it has been very influential even before the movie spawned the Guy Fawkes mask industry. And it takes its inspiration. It makes its inspirations very well known as well. It's a very interesting, like, I sound very critical of it. It's definitely worth reading. It's a very like good look into how early Alan Moore writes. If you liked The Watchmen, you will like V for Vendetta. You just got to kind of climb that edge hill before you can fully buy in. But once you get over the edge hill, it's a pretty good read.
Speaking of inspiration, I don't know if you saw this in your research or not, Kyle. Is it safe to assume that this property is also the sorts of inspiration for the anonymous people using the Guy Fawkes mask?
They're one and the same. The movie came out in 2005, and the anonymous Guy Fawkes mask trend immediately followed.
So that's all this.
That trend is, when I said launched the Guy Fawkes mask industry, I was not
That's what you were
joking.
talking about.
Yeah. So let's talk about the movie now. In 2005, a movie based on the graphic novel was released under the same name. It's directed by James McTeigue, who I didn't recognize a lot of his directing credits. He was a assistant director on Star Wars Attack of the Clones and most of the Wachowski films of the early 2000s. Okay. It was written by the Wachowskis. This was their follow-up project to the Matrix trilogy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It stars Natalie Portman as Evie Hammond, Hugo Weaving as V, John Hurt as the leader, and Stephen Fry is a character in that is not in the books, but is based loosely on Descombe. That's the notable cast. It more or less follows the plot I outlined with some names and dates changes. It's set, like I said earlier, it's set in 2020 instead of 1997, and the inciting incident for Norse Fire's takeover isn't nuclear war, but global viral pandemic. Sorry, everyone. It replaces Moore's criticism with Thatcherism, with a more pointed criticism of the Bush administration, and sets the main conflict more clearly as American liberalism versus American neoconservatism rather than anarchy versus tyranny. V is more clearly depicted as good and the leader more clearly as evil rather than the shades of gray that they are in the book, and it loses some of the subtlety in the depictions of the fascist state. However, Evie has more agency as an adult, and makes more decisions rather than is just like, good job, you have passed my test. You will now carry on my legacy, but like takes an active role in her in not unbecoming a victim, so to speak. And like we said earlier, the Gordon character is completely different. He's not a criminal. He's like a resistance force within the propaganda wing and is killed because of that rather than like circumstantial gang violence. The movie led to the adoption of the Guy Fawkes mask as a symbol of anonymous opposition to oppressive forces. And we can talk about that more if we want, but we've talked about it a little already.
I feel like Anonymous goes from being this thing that's dumb and everyone hates to like, then you'll hear them take down like Russian propaganda sites. And you're like, oh, all right. I see what you're doing over there.
My understanding of Anonymous is that it's not an agency. It's not a like central force. So anyone can do anything and can come and claim Anonymous did it. So your annoying high schooler who fished the password to their school's website and changed the banner to say Principal Johnson is a bag of farts can claim that as an act of Anonymous
struck again.
Struck again.
Those
much
bastards.
Like the like professional white hat hackers who did in fact like take down the like KGB infrastructure for a day or two.
Chaotic neutral. Pure chaotic neutral.
Pure chaotic neutral. Alan Moore claims he has not seen the movie, and after not liking adaptations of From Hell and The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, refuses all credit and royalties from the V for Vendetta film.
Yeah,
Interesting.
The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen was forgettable.
We're not here to talk about League of Extraordinary Gentlemen today, but I really like that movie. Although I would say it is weird to tie V for Vendetta to the sins of League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen graphic novel is very vastly different than the movie. Where they're again, similar thing. They're not as heroic as the movie would have you believe. and it's just the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen graphic novel, from my understanding, I have not read it, is weird. Is just really weird it's very Alan Moore. Like Alan Moore than anything else, almost anything else he's done.
I found a listicle online just talking about all of the movies that have been adapted by Alan Moore's work and what he has said about them.
He hates them all.
He hates them all. From Hell,
Wow.
the quote is, "It had been a bad idea to watch it after all." League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, the quote is, "Quatermain's character was thrown out the window on the whim of an actor." Constantine, well, take my name off of it.
Wow.
Oh my god.
Constantine is also very different from the books, but I like the Constantine movie is
I think
very fun.
I mean, people have a lot of good things to say about the Constantine movie. V for Vendetta, they offended me over the V for Vendetta film. What does he say here?
He was the one who
I'm not going to see it.
The criticism that the conflict is like American liberalism versus neoconservatism rather than the anarchy and tyranny are his words from when
quote, "It's been turned into a Bush era parable by people too timid to set a political satire in their own country."
Yep.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I mean, he's not wrong.
He's not wrong. He's not wrong. Again, like I said earlier, like if you're like Kyle said it too, if your intent is to tell that story, that is not that story.
No.
Yeah.
The movie is not that story.
What's he say about Watchmen?
Watchmen, I will also be spitting venom all over it for months to come.
Watchmen is weird in that it is very.
That one is fair.
It's very text accurate.
Yeah.
It's very context inaccurate.
Did you read Watchmen, Kyle?
Yes, I've read Watchmen a few times, and I like the movie too. But like,
yeah, it's not bad. It's very different.
It misses the point.
Did you think the HBO series was closer to it, like closer to hitting the point?
Until the last like episode and a half, I think so. I liked the HBO series a lot too, and it was more. I mean, it's a completely different story, so it's hard to say, but it's like more aligns with Alan Moore's intent, I think. But then endings are hard. It doesn't nail the ending, I don't think.
Got it. And then Batman Killing Joke. He doesn't like that either.
That's
that one's. I mean, it's different than the other ones. But
it's
I like
different.
That.
It's not my favorite DC animated adaptation of a comic story, but it's also like that would not have made an hour and it would not have made a feature length story on its own either. I don't think because they add some stuff to that. They flesh it out with some of their own material, and that's fine. Alan Moore hates Hollywood, hates any capitalistic endeavor almost entirely. He, I think, is currently living in some British wilderness somewhere, just cranking out the occasional graphic novel when the urge strikes him. But he has described Hollywood as a blood god who demands living sacrifice.
I mean, he's not wrong.
Unironically has described it as that, and he's not incorrect. So he I don't see a film adaptation of any of his movies meeting his standards because he's a curmudgeonly old man.
Yeah.
Any closing thoughts before we wrap up, guys?
I like this. I liked hearing about this. Again, it was a reminder that I haven't watched the movie in 16 years. So it was like rewatching the movie for the first time.
The movie was pretty critically pretty critically acclaimed for its time.
Except for by Moore himself.
Except for by Alan Moore. It is a very 2005 superhero movie. And I know it was for a while. I mean, I think for me, it was kind of my first exposure to to a gay storyline that was like sympathetic and like humanizing, and I was like, and like notable for the time because it was 2005, and
It's a really good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of
The
ahead of its time in
Valerie,
that
the
regard.
Valerie scene, when Natalie Portman is reading that letter, is very well done in the movie, and I think it's worth watching it for that.
I think there's something to say too for like it being 2005, and yeah, that movie definitely wears its heart on its sleeve as a Bush administration red versus blue American movie.
Yeah.
But 2005, there weren't a lot of really mainstream radical movies coming out.
2005, we were just past Bush's reelection, and we were just starting the like rah they attacked us, let's kill them, go America steam had worn out, and we were finally like critical of George Bush again.
You guys are definitely forgetting American Sweetheart, Michael Moore, and his scathing commentary, Fahrenheit 9/11.
I mean, but that was very divisive, where this was like pretty well received at the time. I know.
Yeah. I mean,
I agree.
That's definitely true. And like, so the reason that I bring this up is because I listened to a lot of mid 2000s punk rock because I'm a trash panda. And there was a lot of really heavy punk music coming out from 2000 to 2004, but not a lot of that stuff really made it to the mainstream.
No.
Outside of like Green Day, you know, and Green Day's mid 2000s albums leave a lot to be desired. It's certainly not Basket Case. So by 2005, to have a movie like V for Vendetta with a star like Natalie Portman, this was early Natalie Portman, so I don't know if she was a big name at this point. But
this was post Star Wars.
Yeah,
so.
Definitely. So, you know, it's got a big name to it. It, I think, made a lot of money in theaters.
This is also post Lord of the Rings Hugo
And
Weaving.
Post-Matrix.
Post-Matrix Hugo Weaving too, yeah.
Yep. So there's a lot of draw to this movie, and there wasn't a lot of bubblegum pop stuff coming out to really radicalize young people. And as a radicalized young people, I have a special appreciation for that in 2005. But boy, howdy, watching this movie in 2020, it wears its 2005 on its t-shirt.
Yeah,
that's for darn
sure
sure.
does. Yeah.
It, much like we talked about this, much like it is ironic that the fascist dickheads have co-opted this property, much like they've co-opted the Punisher.
Yes.
And they co-opted the Matrix. They co-opted another Wachowski, like the red pill. Like that is a Matrix image that is ripped whole cloth from the Matrix and like used by people that the Wachowskis would diametrically oppose. So yeah, it's a bummer. It's a bummer. The Guy Fawkes mask was the original Joker meme for anyone who needs that put in a 2020 context.
Yeah.
The Guy Fawkes mask was the original Joker meme. That's going to do it for us today. Thank you for listening to our flavor text. You can follow along with the arguments on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at DebateThisCast, or on our website at debatethiscast.com. Please rate, review, and tell your friends all about us. Much like the revolution, we can only win when we break the bonds of not telling your friends about our show or something.
Nailed it.
Thank you again to Nathan LV for helping to sponsor the show. Don't forget that you can support the show and commission your own flavor text by supporting us at patreon.com/debatethiscast. Until next time, I'm Kyle Harper.
I'm Todd. People shouldn't be afraid of their government. Government should be afraid of edgy hedgehogs pursuing the Master Emerald. Thomas.
I'm Matt. Tickets for Northfire go on sale next Tuesday. Cole.
And I'm Andrew. What if Tuxedo Mask were a domestic terrorist? Henderson.
And we're saying thanks for debating with us. And if you think we're wrong, you can come fight us behind the swing sets, nerds.